It's the bone of a question caught in your throat, pre-dawn size of the day's first traffic, shoulders like fists under your skin. Say it's raining this morning, you've just left the woman's blue musk and duvet to find devil knows what in the world, your wet collar, too thin jacket, no match for pissed off sky gods. And say this car pulls near, plastic bag for passenger side window, trading rain for music, Marvin Gaye. And maybe you know this song. How long since a man you called father troubled the hi-fi, smoldering Newport in hand, and ran this record under a needle? How long since a man's broken falsetto colored every hour indigo? Years since he drifted, dreaming into rice fields, stammered cracked Viet Cong, gunboats and helicopters swirling in his head. Years since his own long walks, silent returns, and Marvin's many voices, his only salve. He came up harder than you know, your father. Didn't make it by the rules. Your father came up hard, didn't get to make no rules. Graying beard, calloused hands, fingernails thick as nickels, you were the boy who became that man, without meaning to. And know now, a man's life is never measured in beats, but beatdowns. Not line breaks, just breaks. You hear Marvin fade down the avenue, and it caresses you like a break. Your father, Marvin, and a million men just like them have already moaned every book you will ever write. This you know, baby. This you know. So we were at dinner last night and having a conversation about eyeglasses. And I have these that they're not bifocals exactly, but I'm nearsighted, so I can't see far when I drive, so these are set up so I can see far. But I was noticing when I had to take my glasses off to read, so they have this really cool thing where I can look down and I can see here. But there's this weird in-between spot where it blurs, so I'm still trying to figure out how to manage this. So if I stutter or stumble, it's because I can't see. So I'm going to read 3 short poems and then 1 really long poem. And then I'm going to jump out the way because you guys are going to be amazed at what time it brings up here. I guarantee you. All right? On lyric narrative. The applejack caps of aging players, dusted with February's first, the fur and faux leather collars yanked up around their ears. I see one among them, my father, philosophizing in the bleak light of a street lamp, shoulders hunched, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, begging a smoke from the gold-toothed gun runner. And there, in the middle of the men, a blazing oil can, around which they'll croon to the cruel stars, disinterested moon, and soon the gun runner reaches for a cigarette, a lighter. My father leans into the man's cupped hands, and his whole face glows. A 6-inch switchblade catches in the shadow just behind and to the left of my father, and here is where I force myself awake. Were my father alive, I'd call the house and warn him. Watch your back. Trust no one. And how well do you know the gun runner? But it's 27 winters since we laid him down. Besides, he never was one to put much stock in visions. Voodoo, he'd say. You want to help me hit the numbers, he'd say. My philosophy professors would have called him an empiricist. He believed in what he laid his hands on. My mother, a cigarette, a crumpled dollar bill, an Applejack cap pulled low against the wind. My wife almost wakes, pushes back into my chest. Of course, I pull her close, start again to drift. If everyone in a dream, as I read once, represents the dreamer, what was my father trying to tell me? When am I the gun runner? When am I the wind? When the snow, the moon, or the switchblades glint? On Magical Realism, Ontario, California, 1981. Stained with rosaries and skeletons, some virgin or another praying on his shoulder, Tiny shuffles towards and leans heavy, as if trying into the first perfect hook my father will land that summer. And miles north, Tiny's mother clutches her chest, hearing just then on a dusty mantle in an empty room, framed glass crack and crack and crack and crack and crack again, just along the left jawline of a favorite baby boy who will grow into a man who calls a man nigger in a room full of niggers. And the nigger with the hook, my father asks, what's my name? What's my name? What's my motherfucking name? As the photo frame shatters damn near to dust, Tiny's mother buckles and she cries, God. On metaphor. In back of Daddy's closet, behind the cold and loaded pistol, I find a cedar box of snapshots, his company in camouflage, waving rifles, reefer, and middle fingers at the photographer, at you, and at me. And here, the full-lipped red bone he left in the world without a goodbye. Here, a strange boy with my father's forehead, same sullen eyes. Flip the photo, a stranger's name and dates that don't add. Scrawled, as if rushed, as if a fugitive's note slipped quick to the future. When my mother walks in, I shove the box to the back of the shelf, say nothing of the red bone or the boy. I hand her instead the pistol, a .45, I believe, its cold barrel gleaming in the room's bum light. When she angles it just so, I think I see my father reflected in the steel. Wait, no, not my father, it's me. So this poem here, about 20 years ago, a little over 20 years ago, I guess, around 20 years ago, I was living in DC. True story, I was walking down the street, nighttime, just like this, and something came and flew past my head and went away and flew back. And I thought it was a bat, but it was a bird, it was a small bird. It kept flying, circling, I thought it was attacking me. And what I noticed was, every time it flew away from me, it was going to where this car was. And where the car was another bird. And it was kind of flailing, it had its foot caught in the door, it was flailing against the door and trying to beat itself free. And so the first bird was coming, trying to get help, right? And I thought of, and I wanted to, but it's DC, it's nighttime, it's somebody's car, right? So if I open the door, car alarm goes off, bird's gone, I'm standing there with my car. So I left, and I left the bird, and I felt bad for years and years and years, and I couldn't get that out of my head. And I would try to write about it, but I never was able to. And then recently, I guess within the past couple of years or so, I came across a story I was reading about Eric Dolphy, the jazz musician, and how he used to try to transcribe, notate bird calls, right? There was something in the bird calls to him that were very pure, that he was trying to get at in his own sound. So something about that linked me back to the earlier image, the earlier event, and I was finally able to write the poem. So it took me a while, but I finally did it. And It's a long one, so settle in. And it has, the title itself is long, but it's we call it a bleeding title, so the title leads into the text, so I'm just going to read the title and then start the poem. Upon reading that Eric Dolphy transcribed even the calls of certain species of birds, I think first of two sparrows I met when walking home late night years ago in another city not unlike this. The one bird, frantic, attacking I thought the way she swooped down, circled my head, and flailed her wings in my face. How she seemed to scream each time I swung. How she dashed back and forth between me and a blood-red Corolla parked near the opposite curb. How, finally, I understood. I spied another bird, also calling, its foot inexplicably caught in the car's closed door, beating its whole bird body against it, trying, it appeared, to bang himself free. And who knows how long he'd been there, wailing. Who knows? He and the other I mistook at first for a bat. They called to me. Something between squawk and chirp, something between song and prayer, to do something, anything. And like any good God, I disappeared. Not indifferent exactly, but with things to do, and most likely on my way home from another heartbreak. Call it 1997, and say I'm several thousand miles from home, by which I mean those were the days I made of everyone a love song. By which I mean I was lonely and unrequited. But that's not quite it either. Truth is, I did manage to find a few to love me, but couldn't always love them back.
Come on.
The Rasta law professor, the firefighter's wife, the burlesque dancer whose daughter blackened drawings with M's to mean the sky was full of birds the day her daddy died. I think his widow said he drowned one morning on a fishing trip. Anyway, I'm digressing. But if you asked that night, did I mention it was night? Why I didn't even try to jimmy the lock to spring the sparrow, I couldn't say truthfully that it had anything to do with envy, with wanting a woman to plead as deeply for me as these sparrows did, one for the other. No, I'd have said something instead about the neighborhood itself. The car thief shot a block and a half east the week before, or about the men I came across nights prior, sweat-slicked and shirtless, grappling in the middle of the street, the larger ones chest pressed to the back of the smaller, bruised and bleeding both. I know you thought this was about birds, but stay with me. I left them both in the street, the same street where I'd leave the sparrows, the men embracing, and for all one knows, especially one not from around there, they could have been lovers. The one whispering an old, old tune into the ear of the other, baby, baby, don't leave me this way. I left the men where I'd leave the sparrows and their song. And as I walked away, I heard one of the men call to me, please, or help, or brother, or some such. And I didn't break stride, not one bit. It's how I've learned to save myself. Let me try this another way. Call it 1977, and say I'm back west, south central Los Angeles. My mother and father at it again, but this time in the street. Broad daylight, and all the neighbors watching. One, I think his name was Sonny, runs out from his duplex to pull my father off. You see where I'm going with this. My mother crying out, fragile as a sparrow. Sonny fighting my father, fragile as a sparrow. And me, years later, trying to get it all down. As much for you, I'm saying, as for me. Sonny catches the left, lies flat on his back, blood starting to pool, and his own wife wailing, my mother wailing, and traffic backed now half a block. horns, whistles, and soon sirens. 1977, summer, and all the trees full of birds. Hundreds, I swear. And since I'm the one writing it, I'll tell you they were crying. Which brings me back to Dolphy and his transcribing. The jazz man, I think, wanted only to get it down pure, to get it down exact. The animal racking itself against a car's steel door, the animals in the trees reporting, the animals we make of ourselves and one another, flailing, failing. Stay with me now.
Come on.
Days after the dust-up, my parents took me to the park. And in this park was a pond. And in this pond were birds. Not sparrows, but swans. And my father spread a blanket and brought from a basket some apples and a paring knife. Summertime. My mother wore sunglasses and long sleeves. My father, now sober, cursed himself for leaving the radio, but my mother forgave him and said as she caressed the back of his hand that we could just listen to the swans. And we listened, and I watched. Two birds coupling, one beating its wings as it mounted the other. Summer, 1977, I listened and I watched. When my parents made love, late into that night, I covered my ears in the next room, scanning the encyclopedia for swans. It meant nothing to me then, at least. But did you know the collective noun for swans is a lamentation? And is a lamentation not its own species of song? What a woman wails, punch drunk in the street, or what a widow might sing, learning her man was drowned by swans, a lamentation of them. Imagine the capsized boat, the panicked man struck about the eyes, nose, and mouth each time he comes up for air. Imagine the birds coasting away and the waters suddenly calm. Either trumpet swans or mutes. The dead man's wife running for help, crying to any who listen. A lamentation and a city busy saving itself. I'm digressing, sure. But did you know that to digress means to stray from the flock? When I left my parents' house, I never looked back. By which I mean, I made like a god and disappeared. As when I left the sparrows and the copulating swans. As when someday I'll leave this city, it's every flailing, it's every animal song.